So this is lesson 88A in Algebra 1, quadratic equations and solution of quadratic equations by factoring. Alright, quadratic equation is just a fancy word to talk about an equation that is like x squared plus 3x plus 2. Has a 2 up here as an exponent. And that's the biggest exponent it has. We're pretty much looking at what's called a quadratic equation. Now, the key thing to quadratic equations is called the zero factor theorem. And that says that if we multiply two numbers, we'll call them x and y, and get 0, then something has to be true. Either this has to be 0, or this has to be 0, or both have to be 0. Because you cannot multiply two numbers together and get 0 unless one of the numbers is 0. So if we can find out that one of the numbers is 0, then no matter what number this is, our answer is 0. Okay, that's very, very important when we're doing solving quadratic equations, or really any equation. So let's start with an example here. So if we have x squared minus 18, and we say that equals 3x. Alright, first of all, we have to set this equation equal to 0. So we're going to subtract 3x from both sides. And we get x squared minus 3x minus 18 equals 0. Notice, I started with the biggest number here, then I went, and the number on this one is actually a 1, right? Then I went to the last number that didn't even have an x in it. So 3, 2, 1, or 2, 1, 0 x's. Put them in that order, because in order to solve these, they have to be in that order. Alright, so first step, make a parenthesis. Make two parentheses next to each other. Take this, put one there and one there. There's two of them. We're going to split them up. In fact, one of the things that's important is this number right here, that 2, that tells you how many answers you're going to have. So if that were a 4, you're going to have 4 answers. If it was a 3, you're going to have 3 answers. So we have 2 answers. All right, now what we're looking for is, now let me get rid of some of my junk here. Put my x back. What I'm looking for the number that goes here and the number goes here, I'm looking for two numbers that when multiplied together give me a negative 18 and added give me a negative 3. Okay? So what I normally do is I look for two numbers multiplied to give me 18, or if I add or subtract them, I get 3. I'm not going to worry about the negative. Just two numbers multiplied together give me 18, added or subtracted, the difference between them or whatever gives me 3. So let's look at 6 and 3. Alright, multiplied together they give me 18, and 6 plus 3 is 9, but 6 minus 3 is 3. So those are the two that I'm going to work. Now let's figure out what sign to put in them. This sign right here will go on the biggest number. Okay? Now let's look and see what sign goes on this one. What do I multiply this by to get a negative 18? Well, a negative times a negative would be a positive. So a negative times a positive would give me that negative there. And then I look and say, okay, negative 6 plus 3, that's negative 3. So that's kind of a check. Alright, so that's called factoring. I factored it down. Now I've got to find out what's going to, and I've got to not forget to put the 0 on there. Now I've got to figure out what is going to make the 0. Because remember, before I said if you have two numbers multiplied together and they give you 0, one of these has to be 0. If I have two numbers that multiply together to give me 0, either this is 0 or this is 0. Well, what number can I put in here for x that's going to make that 0? Well, it's always going to be the opposite of that. So x has to be 6 in order to make that 0. X has to be equal to negative 3 to make that equal to 0. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for. Two answers, so that if I put one of them in, I get a 0. I put one of them in here, I get a 0. So my answer is x equals 6 and negative or 6 or negative 3. I take either one of these answers, plug it into my original one, and it will work. Alright, so that's factoring. So this is example 88.2. Again, the first thing we need to do is make that equal to 0. So we're going to take this and bring it over here. So we're going to add 4x squared to both sides. Okay, and usually what I do is if it's negative, I usually move that one over because then it will change it to a positive. Alright, so when I have something like this, this is called the difference of two squares. That means that if I can take the square root of that, and if I can take the square root of that, I don't really have to do any work. All I have to do is, and again, this is just looking at these. 4x squared, well, I know there's a square root of 4. I know there's a square root of x squared. Square root of 4 is 2, square root of x squared is x. So I know that works. Square root of 25 is 5. There's a minus sign between them. So this is called the difference of two squares. So all I do is I take the square root of the first term and put it in both of those places. Then I take the square root of 25, and then I make one a plus and one a minus. Okay, so now I broke it down into what are called two binomials. Bi means two. I have two parts to each one of those. So there's my two binomials. So either this one has to be 0, so that when I multiply it by this I get 0, or this has to be 0, so when I multiply it by this I get 0. So we're going to do both equations, or both expressions, and set them equal to 0. There's the first one. There's the second one. And again, you know you're going to have two answers because up here there's a 2 on there. Alright, let's keep going there. We subtract 5, so we get 2x equals negative 5. Divide by 2, x equals negative 5 halves. There's one of our answers. Over here we're going to add 5 to both sides. 2x equals 5. Divide by 2, cancel, x equals 5 halves. There are our two answers. Let's look at example 88.3. Okay, so again, we need to set this equal to 0. So we're going to take this, because it's negative, and we're going to move it over here, because when we move it across, it'll change the sign to a positive, and that's what I want. So that gives me x squared plus x minus 56. Okay, so once I'm in this place, then I go ahead and make two parentheses, make them equal to 0. Again, I take an x, put it there. Now I'm looking for two numbers multiplied together, give me 56, added, give me 1. Or subtracted, give me 1. Doesn't really matter. And because you're so smart and you know your multiplication tables, you're going to use 8 and 7. Because 8 times 7 is 56. Now, again, look at this number right here. This is a plus. So that means my plus sign is going to go in front of my biggest number. And how do I get a 8 and 7 to give me a 1? Well, if I have an 8 and I subtract 7, then I get a positive 1. So those are the signs I put there. Plus, positive 8 times negative 7 is negative 56. So next question is, what can I add to 8 to get 0, so that when I multiply it by this, I get 0? Well, it's always going to be the opposite, so negative 8 goes there. What's going to make that 0? A positive 7. So x equals negative 8 or positive 7. And I'm done. Alright, last one is 3x squared minus 6x equals 9. So again, we want that equal to 0, so we're going to subtract 9 from both sides. Okay, notice I have a number in front of there. Can't have that. There can't be anything in front of there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look and see I've got a 3 here, a 6 here, and a 9 here. I can pull a 3 out of here, a 3 out of here, and a 3 out of here. So if I do that, I end up with 3, and then in parentheses, I'm kind of doing the opposite of distribution. And if I put a 3 out of there, I don't have any in there. If I put a 3 out of there, I have 2, and I have a 3. So that if I were to distribute this times this, get my 3x squared, this times this gives me 6, this times this gives me 9. So I know I did it correctly. So that 3 doesn't really mean anything anymore. It's just kind of out there. And I make my 2 parentheses. Put an x, put an x. Two numbers multiplied together give me 3. Well, the only ones are 3 and 1. Okay, this sign right here tells me the minus sign goes in front of the biggest number. So we'll put it there. And then negative 3, how do I go from a negative 3 to a negative 2? Well, I add 1. Also, I can check by going negative 3 times positive 1 gives me negative 3, so I did it correctly. So I'm going to have two answers because of this. What makes that 0? X is 3. That makes this 0. 3 minus 3 is 0. What makes this 0? Negative 1. Okay, when I put that in there, I get that answer, and I am done. And that's it for lesson number 88.